Understanding China has never been more important and more difficult. Takshashila's latest executive capsule course, Watching China, is an all virtual course that will help you decode China's politics and policies. Learn about the party state structure, ideology, and policy drivers. Master the language of Communist Party discourse and open source research. The course is perfect for professionals, journalists, students, or anyone curious about the Asian giant. Sign up now on the link in the description to start understanding China like never before.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Welcome to All Things Policy, the daily podcast from Takshashila that takes a deep dive into innovative policy developments. I'm your host, Maya. I am an assistant program manager at Takshashila. I help manage and deliver our postgraduate program in public policy, which is our flagship program. The PGP is a comprehensive 48-week hybrid program aimed at those who want to explore both the theory and practice of public policy. Today, I'm with Vanshika, a research analyst for the Indo-Pacific Studies program.
Hi, Maya. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
My pleasure. In today's podcast, we are discussing one of Karnataka's most discussed and recent policy schemes, the Shakti program. It is part of the Congress government's 5 guarantees, election promises made at the time of assembly elections in 2023. To give you some background, the idea behind the scheme is very simple and powerful, offering free rides on state-run buses to all women and transgender individuals in the state. The scheme was launched in June 2023 with the aim of helping women to be mobile, enter the workplace, and access education. As of mid-October 2024, the state has invested over Rs 7,500 crore, providing more than 300 crores free rides to women.
Wow, that sounds really impressive, Maya. But why is this scheme important for India?
That's a great question. For many women, especially those in rural areas and from marginalized communities, the cost of bus fares has stopped them from working, studying, or simply leaving their homes for any reason. India is well known for having a shamefully low female labor force participation rate, an average of 23% below such countries as Somalia and Malaysia, and only slightly above Saudi Arabia. The economic contribution of Indian women is less than half the global average at 17% GDP. The main question here is, how do we get women back into education and the workforce? One way policymakers have often suggested is to make transport free. Free transport has been trialed in several countries, including Luxembourg and Estonia, to reduce emissions. Bangalore definitely has a congestion and pollution problem. Numerous studies have shown that when public transport is free, private vehicles reduce and congestion improves. But while similar anti-congestion schemes have been tried in many countries before, India is the first to trial free transport for women, specifically with the intention of helping them to enter public life.
Oh, wow. So you've mentioned a few other countries, but which other states in India have a similar scheme, Maya?
The Shakti scheme has been attempted in other Indian states. In 2019, the Aam Aadmi Party launched the Pink Passes scheme in Delhi, which allows women and transgender individuals to travel free in public buses. To date, over Rs 100 crore pink tickets, or pink slips as they're called, have been issued. A 2024 study by Ashoka University found the scheme helped increase in paid work and employment amongst poor women. The states of Punjab, Kerala, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu followed shortly after and began a free bus ride scheme for women in 2021, allowing free travel using public buses.
This all sounds very nice, Maya, but do we have any evidence that this scheme has worked? Do we know the impact it has created?
Definitely. Now that I've given you some context, we can actually get down to the bones and consider if the Shakti scheme has worked. In the 18 months since the scheme was launched, passengers have increased from 93 lakhs daily to 1 crore, according to government figures. Karnataka's Fiscal Policy Institute also released a very insightful study which found that women in the labor force increased from 25% in October December to 30% in the same period of 2023. And the average monthly savings of women rose from rupees 681 to 1,000 in Bangalore for the same period. The study also found that Karnataka's GST collection was estimated as having increased by rupees 300 crore in the year 2023 to 2024, as the money women are saving is being used for consumption activities, which ultimately translates into revenue for the government. The amount saved on travel results in increased income for a traveler, and it's presumed that they would spend a lot of that money on the consumption and purchase of necessary items.
Okay, so it sounds like the scheme has put a huge strain on the state. So, what are some of the challenges that the state faced?
Another great question. So, as you said, the government initially allocated a sum of rupees 1800 crores per year to the scheme. However, this has proven to be woefully inadequate because of the unprecedented number of women passengers, which has put a strain on the buses, maintenance, and even the conductors. Furthermore, the Karnataka government initially announced that it would reimburse the four state bus transport corporations for the scheme, but it now owes them nearly rupees 1800 crore. It's even had to hike its budget for Shakti to rupees 5800 crore for 2025, a figure that outstrips even the increase in GST gains. The four state transport corporations, the Karnataka State Transport Corporation, Bengaluru Metropolitan Transport Corporation, Kalyana Karnataka Road Transport Corporation, and the Northwestern Karnataka Road Transport Corporation were already making losses even before Shakti. Now, there's a strong chance that they may become completely unviable. That may mean that the fares will be raised for everybody. Another issue, there are simply not enough buses. There are roughly 24,000 state buses in Karnataka, completely inadequate for the massive increase in passengers. Buses are now overcrowded and straining, they're not being able to be maintained well, and conductors are completely overworked. So, in a way, the entire system is failing, you could say.
Okay, that sounds quite a bit. And I think these were some of the economic challenges that perhaps could have been foreseen. But what I'm interested in is what are some of the unintended consequences of the scheme, if you think there are any?
So, a lot of unintended consequences have actually popped up. One is the impact on private transport. Private buses, taxis, and rickshaws have protested against the impact on their earnings that were already low because of the pandemic. There have been numerous strikes and bunds. If the private transport system goes out of business, it could lead to even more congestion on the roads and make life harder for commuters in the long run. Furthermore, like all subsidy schemes, Shakti is prone to scams, and several have already begun. In July 2024, a senior KSRTC official admitted that some conductors were generating false tickets to earn incentives from the RTCs. The corporation provides incentives to bus crew members who achieve their targets. Action was taken against 18 conductors. Meanwhile, male passengers are resentful and angry because of overcrowded buses, and needless to say, they're taking it out on the women. Like in Delhi, women commuters in Karnataka have faced resentment and aggression and violence from male commuters, and many have said they feel unsafe or wary to board crowded buses even though they have free passes. Some reports say drivers are not stopping to pick up the women or conductors are refusing to allow them on the buses. There is also fake news being spread about the scheme from various social media accounts. Recently, the KSRTC had to clarify that a bus accident was not due to overcrowding but for other reasons. A smear campaign has been launched on social media, with fake accounts spreading news about overcrowded buses leading to accidents, women going on junkets to meet their lovers or deserting families, women misusing the scheme in various ways, and so on. This has tarnished the reputation of the scheme in some people's eyes. Another criticism is that the Shakti scheme creates more work for conductors. Women have to provide ID cards with their local addresses, and after verification, conductors issue special zero tickets. This, of course, adds another layer of work and bureaucracy to the process. The government has announced it will introduce a smart card for passengers, but like with Aadhaar, this raises all kinds of issues about data privacy. Besides, the Shakti scheme is only available to local women living in Karnataka and not to migrants. Demands are now being made to extend the scheme to migrants as well, who form a large part of the working force and population in Bangalore and who struggle to get to work every day.
Wow, there seem to be quite a few problems with this scheme, as you just pointed out. But I also want to look at the political aspect of this scheme. So I think, and I remember reading this a few days ago, there is also some disagreement within the Congress party itself. So I think there was a controversy in October when the Karnataka deputy CM Shiv Kumar was reported as saying the scheme needed to be revisited. He said the government has been receiving requests from a section of women saying they wanted to pay for their own tickets. And in response, he said, "We will discuss this," hinting at the possibility of voluntary payments. So, how do you think the Congress government has reacted to this?
Yes, what you read was right, and that's a really interesting question. So, what's happened is the Congress National President Mallikarjun leapt in to caution Shiv Kumar and told him not to create doubts. A day later, Shiv Kumar was quoted as saying his statement was completely distorted by the press and the opposition BJP. He said, and I quote here, "There is no question of discontinuing the scheme." Opposition parties, particularly the BJP, have meanwhile accused the Congress government of doling out freebies for votes and being terribly fiscally irresponsible. The Shakti scheme, if continued, will only make tickets more expensive for everyone, they claim. The Karnataka BJP chief, Vijayendra, has said that Karnataka is dangerously close to zero development, with funds needed for roads and transport being diverted towards the Shakti scheme without any logical thinking. Transport Minister Ramalinga Reddy has announced that he will not stop the scheme at any cost, but Reddy admitted that the universal nature of Shakti is causing problems. The other promises made by the government, such as the Anna Bhagya rice scheme, only serves those holding below poverty line cards, whereas the Shakti scheme applies to all women regardless of income. Reddy admitted it might put a strain on the transport department. One suggestion that some have made is that free tickets be given only to those who are genuinely in need and require essential travel, but that too would be very hard to police and very hard to track, in my opinion.
Right. So, Maya, let's look at the bigger picture, right, which is beyond all of these economic problems of the balance sheet. So, this Shakti scheme isn't just about tickets for votes, as I understand. It's also about freedom, about equality, and women finally being visible to policymakers. So, perhaps calling it a freebie is missing the point. We should be focusing on the systems that exclude women from human development. So, instead of calling it a socially inclusive measure such as free transport as a freebie. And we've had a welfare scheme for years. For example, midday meal, which was introduced in government schools. And initially, there was a huge outcry against this. But the media, politician, and everyone else argued that only the poor children should be fed. But now it is recognized as a path breaking scheme. Similarly, we see in states like West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, they've introduced free bicycle schemes, which have been really popular and have actually helped millions of rural girls get access to school and stay in education.
Yes, absolutely. And I really enjoyed what you said about going beyond balance sheets. And just to build on that a little further, I'd like to quote some writing from an Indian Express report I read on how women are emerging from their houses to use Shakti. It talks about how women are traveling in groups with their friends, with their families, to temples, to visit relatives, to go and sightsee. So, one of the examples I read from the Indian Express report was about a woman named Manjula and her friends. They are farm laborers who work for about 200 rupees a day, and they're among the beneficiaries of the Shakti Free scheme. There are also grandmothers with children in tow, families on leisure trips, large groups of women pilgrims, students heading back to their homes for the holidays. It's an apparent reclamation of the public space by one half of the population that's been ignored for too long. There was also another example of Sri Devi, a homemaker from Bangalore, who is part of a group of 4 traveling to a temple. She said, at least women in villages don't have to ask their husbands for money to go out to their parents' house or even to take their children out or to buy necessary groceries. The men are jealous and upset that women don't need their permission anymore. And something I just like to add is it's a very difficult thing to think about, being so dependent on your husband that you have to ask for money to go to your relative's house or go to your parents' house. This is who the scheme will actually help: women who have nothing and who were once confined to the 4 walls of their home and usually can't put a price on that, even though everyone will try to. Rosa Abraham, the assistant professor at the Center for Sustainable Employment and co author of the annual State of Working India report, says while there are studies that draw a correlation between the presence of women in public spaces and its impact on the workforce, it's important to look at these schemes beyond their contribution to GDP or employment generation. What schemes such as Shakti do is that they help women claim public spaces, whether urban or rural, that are still largely gendered. A lot of leisure for women is still in private settings, and the scheme is taking it out into the world. So it's not just about the GDP. The more women enter public spaces, the safer the streets are for everyone. As research has shown, women's savings, however meager, are used for the benefit of the family. And getting women into paid employment has a multiplier positive effect, benefiting families, communities, and the economy at large. All these larger benefits go beyond finances.
Right. And I think so. The long term success of this scheme also depends on how we clarify its objectives, correct? So, is it to improve public safety? Do we also want a level playing field for women, especially those from marginalized backgrounds who don't enjoy the same sort of freedoms that women in urban areas do? And do we believe that spending on the scheme will be effective in the long run?
Thank you so much for that question, Vanshika. So, studies show that fares are not the sole factor influencing women on public transport. There are other factors, some of which we've mentioned in this podcast, some we haven't. But examples such as not enough buses, infrequent buses, limited last mile connectivity, concerns about safety and crowds, and harassment on buses, and feeder systems. A recent CPPR study involving 203 respondents revealed mixed perceptions about the Shakti scheme's effectiveness. While about 54.7 found it effective or highly effective, 26% were neutral and 18% found it ineffective because of increased workload for conductors, ticketless travel, and crowded buses. The study suggests enhancing the scheme by doubling the bus fleet, improving safety and comfort at bus stops, and financial literacy and psychological empowerment programs. Yes.
Right. So, as we saw, I think with the Delhi paying passes, right, just giving free rides without overall safety is not enough to encourage women into public spaces. We also need other types of support. So, the Shakti scheme needs more, perhaps, cost benefit studies to clarify if it really works to bring women back into public life.
I completely agree with you, but as the American activist Susan P. Anthony once said, I think the bicycle has done more to emancipate women more than any one thing in the world. I rejoice every time I see a woman ride by on a bike. It gives her a feeling of self reliance and independence the moment she takes her seat, and away she goes. The picture of untrammeled womanhood. Perhaps the Shakti scheme will do the same with buses if we can only iron out its flaws.
Right.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. That's all for today.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.